Johnny Talk Sports, in with the Week 14 college football predictions. If you would have told me back in June or July that we would have gotten to Week 14 of the college football season without having to cancel the rest of the college football season, I would have been surprised, because the furthest I thought we were going to get was probably Week 7, Week 8. We would have gotten really lucky to get to Week 10. Kind of like for the NFL. I wasn't expecting them to be at Week 13. I thought it was going to get canceled probably around Week 9 or Week 10. But here we are. We're 2 weeks away from Conference Championship weekend. We are just a few weeks away from finding out who will be the 4 teams competing in this season's college football playoff. Now, ultimately, there's going to be some controversy no matter who gets in and who gets left out. I mean, it's already being debated whether or not the team that wins the national championship this year will have an asterisk next to it. So, the College Football Playoff Committee will release their second playoff ranking of the season tomorrow night. So, with that, I have a new ranking, a personal ranking of my top 6. I'm only doing top 6. Now, last week, the one question I had going into the ranking was who they're going to put at number 4. Were they going to put in Clemson? Or are they going to put in Texas A&M? Because I anticipated 1, 2, 3 be Alabama, Notre Dame, and Ohio State. So my question was, who would be number 4? Which one loss would the committee value more? Would they value A&M's one loss to number 1 Alabama, even though it was by 28, or would they have valued Clemson's loss to Notre Dame in double overtime? Because I thought they're going to value Clemson's loss a lot more, despite it not being to the better team. While A&M's one loss was to the better team, but it was by a lot of points. But if you watched that game, A&M, they had momentum in that game. There was about 3 plays that went wrong in that first half. If those 3 plays go A&M's way in that first half, it's a much closer game. And A&M would have a serious chance of possibly winning that game. Because they were down 14 when that third and final play, it went wrong for the Aggies, and it led to an Alabama touchdown. And the Kellen Mond pick 6, that also cost A&M 7. So that could have been a much closer game. And I would argue and say that if Alabama and A&M, if they played again in the college football playoff, because that's most likely what's going to happen, if A&M were to win out and Alabama were to win out, Alabama would be the 1 seed and A&M would probably be that 4th seed. If they played again in the college football playoff, I think that game is going to be very close. I think it's going to be closer than 28 points. I think Alabama could probably still win that game, but it would probably only be by like 13 or 14. I think it'd be a lot closer than 28 points if they were to play again. But they put a surprise in that ranking. They ultimately put Clemson at number 3 and Ohio State at 4. You know the saying that actions speak louder than words? Well, that action that the College Football Playoff Committee did last week by putting Clemson at number 3 and Ohio State at 4, it shows that they value that Clemson loss to Notre Dame. It tells me that if Trevor Lawrence would have played in that game, it would have been a different game. And I think it would have been too. I think if Trevor Lawrence plays in that game, I think Clemson wins. Even though Ucla threw for 439 yards in that game, I still think that Clemson wins that game if Trevor Lawrence is there, because Notre Dame would have had to prepare for Trevor Lawrence. So, and I think in the AC Championship game, if it were to be played this week, I think Clemson would probably win. Because Clemson is coming off a big performance against Pittsburgh. Well, Notre Dame, they're coming off a win where they had to play all 60 minutes of that game. So that action tells me that the playoff committee, they value Clemson's one loss more than A&M's one loss to Alabama by still putting them at 5 and behind number 4 Ohio State. So this week, the question I have for the College Football Playoff Committee is, how are they going to value A&M's win? Because A&M only won 20-7 against LSU, and 7 of those points were from the A&M defense. So in reality, this score was 13-7 to me. Because it went for that pick 6, It's 13-7. Now, even if it wasn't a pick six, I mean, they probably should have scored a touchdown because it was short field position. But still, I still think that score was 13-7, even though it was 27. Will they drop A&M a spot? Will they put Florida at 5? Or will they put Florida in the top 4? Because I think Florida, I feel like they earned the right to be in the top 4 this week. They had one of the better performances of the week. So that's the one question I'm going to have. That's the one thing I'm going to look for going into tomorrow's playoff ranking. So I have a new ranking. I'm only doing the top 6. So number 1, no change here. I have the Alabama Crimson Tide number 1, best resume of the season so far. They have wins over number 5 A&M, number 9 Georgia, and at the moment number 22 Auburn. So Auburn will probably fall out of that top 25, but still picking up that win against a ranked Auburn team without Nick Saban, which is huge. And they win in dominating fashion against the 22nd ranked team in the country. That's huge. And I think it's going to be a huge difference that Alabama will probably need to have if they were to lose in the SEC championship game against Florida. If they were to lose that win against Auburn, in that convincing of a fashion, that could be the difference between being in and being out. No surprise here as well. Number 2, I have the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. The Fighting Irish pick up another signature win this week against number 19 North Carolina. Now, North Carolina will probably fall a few spots in the rankings. I don't see them being out of the top 25 like Auburn. I think that North Carolina will probably settle at probably 22, 23, right where Auburn was. Because North Carolina, they didn't play a bad game. Despite losing by 14, that game was a lot closer than that scoreboard said. It's a lot closer. Because North Carolina, they were playing good in that game. They were doing fine. In fact, there was a chance they were going to ultimately win that game and pull off the upset until that 4th down play where Notre Dame was trying to draw North Carolina off sides, and they drew them off sides, which was surprising for them to jump off sides because I would have anticipated Notre Dame not going for a 4th and 1 from their own, 23, 24-yard line in a tie game against the number 19 team in the country when North Carolina has a bit of momentum in that game. And it would have been a huge momentum killer for Notre Dame. It would have given momentum to the other side But yes, that mistake ultimately cost North Carolina that game because it led to a Notre Dame touchdown. Too many mistakes for North Carolina in that game. If North Carolina would have played that game perfectly, I think Notre Dame probably would have had a chance of losing that one. But Notre Dame won. They survived. Sometimes in college football, it's about surviving in advance, and the Irish did that. Now, here's where some of the changes are starting to move in. Number 3, I have the Clemson Tigers. The Clemson Tigers, one of the more dominant performances of the week against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, a team that I believe was in the top 25 at some point in the season. So that win, there is a little bit of value to that. Now, this is kind of where the controversy might set in. At number 4, I have the Florida Gators. Now, I know that they don't have the tiebreaker head-to-head against Texas A&M, but as I said last week, if Florida and Texas A&M, if they rematch, I think Florida would win this time. And Florida, they had one of the more dominant performances of the week against Kentucky. And Kyle Trask is looking like one of the Heisman favorites. In fact, the co-favorite with Mac Jones out of Alabama. So Florida at number 4, that's where I feel like they should be ranked. They've earned the right to be in the top 4. Number 5 is Ohio State. Now, Ohio State, they had their game canceled this week, and they've already had a second game canceled. So that is huge because if one more cancellation for Ohio State, and they're no longer eligible to win the Big Ten because they can't even be in the conference championship game. And for a team like Ohio State to not be in the conference championship, that is huge for teams that are currently on the outside looking in, according to the current college football playoff ranking. So that's huge for those teams on the outside looking in, like Texas A&M, like Florida, like Cincinnati. That's huge if Ohio State can't compete in their conference championship. In fact, not being able to compete in the conference championship, I think that would completely dismantle the Buckeyes' playoff chances. Now, at number 6, I have Texas A&M. Now, Texas A&M, they did not play good at all. I mean, in fact, if Texas A&M, if they play the way they did last weekend against LSU in the remaining 3 games, they're losing at least 2 of them. That's just the way I see it. A&M plays Auburn this week, and that game is always very close. They should beat Tennessee, but Ole Miss is something to worry about because Ole Miss has a really good offense. Now, A&M has the best defense in the SEC, but Ole Miss, they've got a very underrated offense. They moved the football against Alabama really well when they played them. And they moved the ball pretty decently against Florida as well. So that is my top 6. My top 4, Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson, Florida, with Ohio State and Texas A&M on the outside looking in. So without further ado, let's get to the Week 14 college football predictions. Now our first matchup is a Friday night showdown between Louisiana and Appalachian State. Now I will admit 2 things. 1, I was never expecting to predict a matchup like this here on Johnny Talk Sports, but here I am. Both these teams, they're doing some work this season. They're putting in work. And number 2, I haven't really watched much of either of these 2 teams in recent weeks. In fact, I believe the last time I saw either of these teams play was when Louisiana played Coastal Carolina. I think that was the last time I saw Louisiana play. And for Appalachian State, the last time I probably saw them was probably against Marshall, and they lost 17-7. So Appalachian State's defense put in work against Marshall, but their offense just couldn't get going. Now, both these teams, I think, they got some pieces they got some talent pieces on their rosters. But I'm going to go with the team that I think can run the football the best in this game. And I think that's Louisiana, because I think this is going to be a battle of time of possession. I think that if Louisiana, if they assert their running game, it's going to exhaust Appalachian State the later on this game goes. So I'm going to pick Louisiana to win this matchup. I think this game is going to be close from start to finish. But I think it's going to finish with a 27-24 victory for Louisiana in this matchup. I just think the running game will be the difference in this ball game, and Louisiana wins by 3 off of their running game. Next, we have Texas A&M looking to keep their college football playoff hopes alive for one more week, and Auburn, a team that's going to play with a chip on their shoulder, coming off an abysmal Iron Bowl performance. Now, every single time, well, almost every single time, that these 2 teams play, it's close. The only time I can recall this matchup not being close was the first time these 2 played when A&M first joined the SEC Conference, and that was Johnny Manziel's Heisman season. And that was also the year before Auburn got Gus Malzahn. That's the only time I can recall this matchup not being close. So every other time, pretty much every other time, this game has been close. And I think this week is going to be no different. I can't see either of these teams blowing out the other one. But as I explained earlier, that if A&M plays the way they played against LSU last week, they're going to lose at least 2 of their 3 remaining games. Now, I understand that Kellen Mond didn't play that well. The whole offense didn't play well. Although the one good part about their offense last week was Isaiah Spiller, who I think was a major difference maker in that matchup. If it wasn't for Isaiah Spiller, LSU has a much closer shot of winning that game. In fact, they probably could have stolen it from A&M. And I get it. A&M hadn't played in almost 3 weeks. The field was kind of sloppy conditions, almost kind of like against Vanderbilt, where it's first game of the year. Because remember, despite Vanderbilt being winless this season, Vanderbilt almost beat Texas A&M. It was like literally 12-7 that night. So Vanderbilt almost beat A&M. So there has been times this season where the Aggies haven't played like a top 5 team. And I will admit, as a fan of A&M, they haven't played like a top 5 team at a few points this season. In fact, I don't think they've played like a top 5 team really at all this season. I feel like at best, they've played like maybe a top 10, well, lower top 10, maybe top 15 team. But defensively, if this team well, if this team were to win games, it could be carried by the defense with the SEC's best defense. I mean, Auburn, they have been struggling on offense at several points this season. In fact, you can say Auburn's offense has struggled almost the entire season. So there's that for A&M. That's a plus. But the more pressure that gets put on Kellen Mond, the more he cracks under the pressure. So that's something for Auburn. The way I see this game, you know what? I don't really want to do this, but I'm going to say by a score of 31-27. I think A&M gets it's the very close win here. I think Auburn, I think they're going to stay in this game from start to finish. I think their defense is going to carry Auburn in this matchup. But how long can that Auburn defense keep the Tigers in the game? I'm going to pick Texas A&M to win 31-27. But as an A&M fan, I'm not going to be shocked, surprised, or even sad if Auburn wins this game. In fact, I'm going in there thinking Auburn's got a very good shot to win. So I will pick the Aggies, but not by much. Next, we have Clemson and Virginia Tech. The Clemson Tigers and Virginia Tech Hokies. Now for Virginia Tech. Justin Fuente probably on the hot seat. I think his job is safe for now, but I think maybe next season Fuente is probably going to be on the hot seat. As for Clemson, just take care of your business. Just take care of your business from now until the rest of the season, and you'll be in the college football playoff. Just keep winning, and you're going to be one of those 4 teams competing for the national championship. Although the one thing I will say, I think Clemson does win this game handily. They beat Pittsburgh pretty convincingly last week, and I think it's possible they will beat Virginia Tech very convincingly this week as well. But the one thing that's going for Virginia Tech is the running game. Now, it's unknown about Khalil Herbert. In fact, I haven't watched Virginia Tech football in these last couple of weeks. But Virginia Tech's running game as a whole, I think, could keep Clemson on their toes a little bit. I think if their running game can move the football quite well in this matchup, Virginia Tech, they could keep this one close. But with Virginia Tech also losing to Liberty, although they could have beaten Liberty, though, but Justin Fuente kind of cost that one. I think Clemson wins this convincingly. I just think that Virginia Tech is a far more inferior team compared to Clemson. So this one's pretty self-explanatory. I'm just going to pick the Tigers in this one. Speaking of Liberty, next we've got Liberty and Coastal Carolina. Hugh Freeze has put Liberty football on the map, and Coastal Carolina has gotten their university on the map, because the only time I've heard of Coastal Carolina before this college football season was when they won the College World Series a few years ago, back in 2016, and Josh Norman's alma mater. So yeah, another one of the matchups where I never expected to predict this matchup here on Johnny Talk Sports, but it's 2020, so here I am. I think this game is going to be another close one. I think this is going to be one of the more better games of the week. I believe Liberty is back in the top 25. Well, Coastal Carolina, they're still not getting respect from the College Football Playoff Committee, which is not a surprise either. I mean, BYU's not either. I feel like Cincinnati may be a bit more deserving of some respect. Maybe Cincinnati has played like a top 6 team in the college football, in this college football season. But back to Liberty and Coastal Carolina now. I think this game is going to be a hard-fought one. I think we're going to see another close game. It wouldn't surprise me if we saw this game and go into overtime. But I think in the end, Coastal Carolina will keep their undefeated season. I think with Liberty already losing North Carolina State, which is ultimately a close one, a game where maybe Liberty probably should have won, I think Coastal Carolina will get this win here. And Hugh Freeze, he could be a candidate for a head coaching position. I mean, Vanderbilt just fired Derek Mason over the weekend. So maybe Hugh Freeze goes back to the SEC and coaches Vanderbilt, tries to get Vanderbilt football back on the map. Or even South Carolina. Or maybe one of these coaches will take an SEC job. Maybe one's going to take the South Carolina job. Maybe the other will take the Vanderbilt job. Who knows? but I will take Coastal Carolina. And the next matchup we have is Alabama and LSU. And to tell you the truth, this matchup is probably self-explanatory. I mean, I was just trying to find the 7 best matchups of the week. It was kind of hard. But things just keep going from bad to worse for LSU. I mean, their defense hasn't done good all season, and the last thing you want for an LSU fan to hear that statement is you're playing Alabama this week. This game is probably going to be a blowout, probably like 56-7. And your best receiver, Terrence Marshall, has opted out of the season. So really not good if you're LSU. So Alabama, I think they're going to win like 56-7. I just think Mac Jones will probably have like 5 touchdown passes in this game. Najee Harris probably get a rushing touchdown in this. So yeah, things just keep going from bad to worse for the LSU Tigers. Next, we have a Pac-12 showdown between UCLA and Arizona State. And I think this is going to be a very good matchup. I haven't really watched much Pac-12 football this season. I mean, I did watch Oregon and Oregon State in the Civil War this past week. But this is the first time I'm going to be watching UCLA and Arizona State, other than highlights. Now, UCLA, with Chip Kelly, he's probably in the hot seat at this point. Although I'm not sure. They'll probably give him one more season. And for Arizona State, I think they're a program heading in the right direction. I just think it's just a shame that we couldn't get to see the Pac-12 have a more complete of a season than the SEC or the ACC or the Big 12 or even the American Athletic Conference. So I think both these teams, both these programs, they can head into a more positive direction in the long run. I do like the quarterback battle in this matchup. I think both these quarterbacks are going to play very well. And I think if you're a fan of quarterback play, this is going to be a match we're going to want to see because both these quarterbacks are very mobile. But in the end, though, I'm just going to pick Arizona State because I think Arizona State, I think they've got the better defense in this matchup. So I think Arizona State, they win this matchup, and I think it's going to be a relatively maybe low score when you're thinking of Pac-12 football. Because Pac-12, it's kind of about offenses. So I think it's going to be high scoring in a normal game, but in a Pac-12 setting, maybe a relatively lower score. So I'm going to say 34-31. Arizona State gets the win. And finally, what I think is the game of the week, Indiana and Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin no longer eligible to win the Big Ten, so this could be like their Big Ten championship game right here against Indiana. Now, so far, I think going into this matchup, I think that the odds are already set against Indiana because it was announced today that Indiana quarterback Michael Penix Jr., who's been a difference maker for the Hoosiers so far this season, has torn his ACL and he is out for the season. So right now the odds are stacked against Indiana. They're going to Jack Tuttle, the backup quarterback. Tom Allen said that he is a special quarterback as well. So for Indiana to win this game, you've got to find Freifogel because Freifogel has been your best receiver all season. You also have to get the running game going of Stevie Scott. For Wisconsin, kind of the same gist. You've got to get the running game going. I mean, Wisconsin, they looked dominant against Michigan, and they looked completely flat against Northwestern. And if you look flat against Northwestern, only scoring 7 points on Northwestern, and Northwestern loses to Michigan State the next week, what kind of team does it show? What is it like? It just shows what kind of team you might be. So, surprisingly, I don't know who to pick in this game. But if it's coming down to quarterback play, which I think this matchup is going to come down to, I'm going to pick the team that I think has the better quarterback, and that's Wisconsin with Graham Mertz. I mean, I think Wisconsin's defense, though, even though Wisconsin's offense wasn't that good against Northwestern, their defense held their own, only allowing 17 points. And most of the time, 17 is that magic number. Because if you have a decent offense, 17 points is kind of that magic number to win football games. So I'm going to pick Wisconsin in this one because I'm just not sure what to expect out of Indiana backup quarterback Jack Tuttle. At least with Graham Mertz, I know what I'm getting. Because Graham Mertz looks dominant. Like he's looked dominant in a couple of the games he's played this season against Illinois and against Michigan. So at least I know what I'm getting with Graham Mertz. I don't know what I'm getting with Jack Tuttle. So maybe the Hoosiers will prove me wrong, but I'm going with the Badgers in this one. So those are my Week 14 college football predictions. Like, share, and subscribe, and I will talk to you soon. Have a good day, have a good evening, whenever you're watching, and I'll talk to you soon.